Elijah was a quiet boy who lived in a small house with his mother and his younger sister, Mia. Every morning, sunlight peeked through his window, painting bright lines on the walls. But Elijah did not jump out of bed with excitement like other children might. Instead, he liked to sit very still and listen. He often heard music in his mind, beautiful, flowing music that no one else seemed to hear. Even though Elijah did not speak much, he was always thinking. His head was full of ideas and melodies. He would tap his fingers on his desk, on the table, or even on his knees. The tapping helped him feel safe. Sometimes, people thought he was strange because he did not like loud sounds and because he had autism. But Elijah just experienced the world in his own special way. One day, Elijah's mother called from the kitchen. "Elijah, breakfast is ready." Elijah sighed softly. He closed the little notebook on his bed, where he had been writing down some notes for a song. He walked downstairs. The smells of toast and eggs filled the air, but he hardly noticed. His mind was still lost in the tune he had been creating. Mia, his sister, was already at the table. She was scrolling on her phone, giggling at some funny videos. She paused when she saw Elijah. "Hey," she said, but Elijah did not reply. He simply gave a small nod, sat down, and began eating. Their mother gently touched Elijah's shoulder. "Are you okay, honey? You look a bit sleepy." Elijah nodded again, keeping his eyes on his plate. He felt a little overwhelmed by the chatter and the clinking plates, so he stayed silent. When it was time for school, Elijah held his notebook tight against his chest. That notebook was his treasure. It was where he wrote all his music. Each page was filled with little symbols and lines, things only he understood. In his mind, these notes and lines turned into a whole orchestra of sound. At school, many kids rushed around, talking loudly to friends. Elijah tried to walk quietly in the halls, wanting to blend into the background. He did not like crowded places. He found them too noisy. But he had to go to his classroom, so he kept his notebook close and moved through the crowds, hoping no one would notice him. During class, Elijah did well in math and reading, but his true love was music class. When he heard the gentle strum of a guitar or the soft notes of a piano, he felt safe and happy. It was as if the whole world slowed down, letting him breathe easily. His music teacher, Mr. Collins, sometimes noticed Elijah tapping rhythms on the table and smiled, guessing the boy had a gift. But Elijah stayed shy, too unsure to play in front of anyone else. At the end of the day, Elijah returned home, heading straight to his room. He did not want to watch TV or play games like other kids. Instead, he sat on the floor, opened his notebook, and started writing down the song he had been hearing in his mind all day. The notes danced across the paper, forming patterns that only Elijah truly understood. For him, writing music was like writing a diary. It was the best way to share his thoughts and feelings without words. As night fell, Elijah's mother peeked into his room. She saw her son surrounded by sheets of paper, scribbled notes, and soft humming sounds. She wondered if he was lonely or if he was happy in his own world of music. She wanted him to feel loved and safe, but she knew pushing him too hard to socialize might make him upset. So she just smiled, wished him good night, and closed the door gently. That night, Elijah dreamed of a big stage with bright lights shining. He saw himself sitting at a piano, playing a song that made everyone in the audience cry with happiness. In the dream, no one laughed at him or called him weird. They all stood up and clapped, shouting his name. Elijah woke up with a strange warmth in his heart. Maybe one day, his music would be heard by everyone, and maybe they would understand him. But for now, he was just Elijah, the quiet genius with a heart full of melodies and a notebook filled with secrets that no one else knew how to read. The next day at school started like any other. Elijah walked to his locker, trying not to bump into anyone. He felt a jolt of fear whenever someone brushed past him. He was not good at making friends, and he had grown used to being alone. But that morning, something happened that changed everything. A boy named Damon, who was popular and liked to play sports, noticed Elijah holding his notebook. Damon had seen Elijah writing in it all the time, and for some reason, he thought it was funny. Maybe he thought Elijah was weird, or maybe he just wanted to show off in front of his friends. "Hey, quiet boy," Damon said, blocking Elijah's path. "What's in that notebook?" "Your diary." Elijah tried to step away, but Damon moved closer. A few other kids gathered around, curious about what was happening. "It's just my music," Elijah whispered, his eyes on the floor. Damon snorted. "Music? You mean you write songs? Let me see." Before Elijah could react, Damon snatched the notebook out of his arms. A cold shock of terror flashed through Elijah's body. That notebook was precious to him. It held all his carefully written compositions. "Give it back," Elijah pleaded, his voice shaking. He reached out, but Damon held it high, out of reach. Come on," Damon said with a mean grin, flipping through the pages. "Wow, look at this stuff. It's all these weird lines and notes. Does this even mean anything?" Elijah's heart pounded. He felt tears threaten to spill from his eyes, but he tried to remain calm. "Please, give it back," he said again, more quietly. But he saw Damon's smirk widen and panic rose in his chest. Damon's friends laughed. One of them said, "Is he writing alien language or something?" Elijah felt helpless. He wanted to grab the notebook, but he was too afraid. He hated the noise around him and the cruel laughter echoing in the hallway. Suddenly, Damon tore one of the pages out of the notebook, letting it float to the floor. "Oops," he said, pretending to be sorry. "Guess you'll have to rewrite that." The laughter around them grew louder. Elijah dropped to his knees, frantically picking up the torn page. The music he had worked so hard on was now crumpled and dirted. Damon wasn't done. He tossed the rest of the notebook on the ground and stepped on it, leaving footprints on the pages. Elijah's chest felt tight, and he could hardly breathe. He grabbed what was left of his notebook, holding it to his chest as if it were a wounded bird. A teacher finally appeared, yelling, "What's going on here? Break it up." But it was too late. The damage was done. Damon and his friends slipped away, snickering. Elijah stayed on the floor, staring at the ruined pages. All day, he felt numb. In class, he could not focus on anything the teacher said. He could only think about Damon's face and the pages torn from his beloved notebook. At lunch, he sat alone, gingerly trying to smooth out the papers, but the notes were ruined. It was as if someone had taken his voice away. When Elijah got home, he quietly went to his room and closed the door. He did not feel like talking to his mother or Mia. He opened his notebook, tears blurring his vision as he tried to rewrite some of the music from memory. But his hands trembled and he could not concentrate. That night, he slept fitfully, dreaming of laughter and the sound of tearing paper. It was the beginning of a deep hurt in his heart, one that would not go away easily. Damon's cruelty had ignited a spark of fear and sadness inside Elijah, and he wondered if he would ever feel safe with his music again. A few days passed. Elijah kept to himself, his eyes always cast down. He did not trust anyone not to make fun of him. The broken notebook was tucked away in his backpack, taped together, but never opened. He was too scared someone would grab it again. One afternoon, while he was sitting alone in the school courtyard, a warm, gentle voice spoke behind him. "Hello, Elijah. May I sit with you?" Elijah turned to see Sophia, one of the music teachers who sometimes helped in Mr. Collins's classes. She was young, with kind eyes and a bright smile. Elijah shrugged, scooting over a bit. He was not used to teachers sitting with him in the courtyard. Sophia lowered herself onto the bench. "I've seen you in the music room a few times," she said softly. "You're always tapping your fingers like you're playing a piano in your mind." Elijah looked at his hands, which were indeed tapping an imaginary tune. "I guess I do that a lot," he mumbled. Sophia smiled gently. "You know, it takes a lot of creativity to compose music. Mr. Collins told me you write your own songs. Is that true?" Elijah hesitated. He was not sure if he should trust her. Memories of Damon's laughter still stung. But something in Sophia's eyes made him feel safe. He gave a small nod. Sophia's smile grew. "That's wonderful. I would love to hear your music someday if you'd like to share." Elijah swallowed, hugging his backpack closer. I don't know, he said. Someone took my notebook and ruined it. His voice trembled, and his eyes filled with tears he tried to hide. Sophia gently placed a hand on his shoulder. I'm sorry that happened to you. But please don't give up. You have a gift, Elijah. I can tell. Elijah looked up at her, and for the first time in days, he felt a tiny spark of hope. Why do you think I have a gift? He asked softly. Because your eyes light up when you talk about music, Sophia replied. And because I've seen how you listen to the notes, how you tap out rhythms that are more complex than most people realize. That's not something everyone can do. Elijah felt his cheeks warm. No one had ever told him something like that before. Most people just thought he was weird. Maybe Sophia was different. That's very nice of you, he whispered. But what if people laugh at me again? Sophia's expression turned serious but gentle. Some people might not understand, and some might be unkind. But there will always be people who do care and who see how special you are. I promise. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the afternoon sun shining on their faces. Elijah felt a little less alone. When the bell rang, Sophia stood up. If you ever want to practice your music or share your songs, you can find me in the music room, okay? Elijah nodded, a faint smile on his lips. As he watched her walk away, he clutched his backpack. Inside was his damaged notebook, but suddenly it did not feel like a lost cause anymore. Maybe, just maybe, he could rewrite those songs. Over the next few days, Elijah began to visit the music room during lunch breaks. Sometimes Sophia was there, practicing a piano piece or tuning a guitar. She always welcomed him warmly, never forcing him to talk. One day, she asked if he would like to play a few notes on the piano. Nervous, Elijah sat at the bench and touched the keys gently. A melody he had kept hidden in his mind started to flow out, soft and uncertain, but undeniably beautiful. Sophia listened with tears in her eyes. Elijah, she said in a hushed voice, you do have a gift. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Those words sank deep into Elijah's heart. He still remembered Damon's cruelty, but now he had an ally, someone who believed in him and his music. That belief was like a tiny seed, ready to grow if only he would water it with hope. Elijah's visits to the music room became more frequent. He still felt nervous around other students, especially in crowded hallways, but knowing he could escape to the quiet of the piano with Sophia nearby made school a bit more bearable. One day, Sophia sat down next to Elijah, excitement shining in her eyes. Elijah, the school is hosting a talent show next month, she said. I think you should perform one of your pieces. Elijah's eyes went wide with fear. Me? On stage? He shook his head. No, people will laugh. Not everyone will laugh, Sophia replied gently. Some will, perhaps, but many won't. Besides, you don't even have to show your face if you don't want to. You can stay behind a curtain or keep the lights dim. Elijah chewed his lip. The idea of playing in front of a crowd made his stomach churn. Still, a small part of him remembered the dream he had, where he was on a big stage and the people were clapping, not laughing. What if I do it without my name? He asked quietly. Like, anonymous? Sophia smiled. We can do that. I can ask the organizers to introduce you as a mystery performer. That way, you can focus on just your music. Would you like to try? Elijah hesitated a long moment. The memory of Damon destroying his notebook replayed in his mind. Yet, he also remembered how good it felt to share his music with Sophia. Finally, he gave a small nod. I'll try, he whispered. The weeks leading up to the talent show were stressful but exciting. Elijah practiced every day. At home, he even started rewriting the songs that Damon had torn, making them better than before. This time, he made sure to keep his new pages safe in a locked drawer. Meanwhile, posters for the talent show popped up all over school. The list of participants grew: singers, dancers, comedians, and even a magician. Nobody knew that Elijah was one of them. Even Damon did not seem to realize, which was a relief. Elijah wanted no trouble. The night of the show arrived. Backstage, Elijah wore a simple black outfit. His heart hammered in his chest, and he felt like he might faint from nerves. He stood in a small corner, hugging his notebook, waiting for the stage manager to call him. Sophia found him and rested a hand on his back. "You'll do great," she whispered. "Remember, just focus on the piano and the music you love." Elijah nodded, sweat beading on his forehead. When the stage manager announced, "We have a very special performance from an anonymous musician," Elijah's legs felt weak. But he forced himself to walk out onto the dimly lit stage. A single spotlight shone on the piano. The rest of the stage was dark, so the audience could not see his face well. That helped calm his nerves just a little. He sat down, opened his notebook, and took a deep breath. The first notes were shaky, but as Elijah closed his eyes, he let the music guide him. The piano sound wrapped around the auditorium like a gentle blanket. People in the audience leaned in, caught by the haunting melody. It was unlike any of the other acts that night, soft yet strong, quiet yet full of emotion. As Elijah reached the middle of the piece, his fear started to melt away. He forgot about Damon, forgot about the crowd, and simply played what was in his heart. When the final note faded, there was a moment of hushed silence before the audience burst into applause. Some people even stood up, clapping and cheering. Elijah blinked, overwhelmed. He had never imagined such a reaction. From the shadowy seats, he could see smiles and astonished faces. He gave a quick bow, then hurried off the stage, his heart pounding, but in the best way possible. Backstage, Sophia was there to greet him with tears in her eyes. "You did it," she exclaimed, hugging him. "They loved you." Elijah felt warmth spread through his chest. For so long, he had been afraid to share his music, certain that people would laugh. But they had not laughed. They had listened, and they had cheered. It was like a door had opened in his mind, showing him that maybe people could accept him and his music after all. But as he stepped out into the hallway, he spotted Damon standing near the exit, glaring. Their eyes met, and Damon's face twisted with anger. Elijah felt a chill run down his spine. He hurried past, hoping Damon would not try anything. Tonight was supposed to be special, and for a brief moment, it had been. Little did he know, Damon was already plotting his next move. For a short while, things seemed brighter. People at school whispered about the mystery pianist who had wowed everyone at the talent show. Some suspected it was Elijah, but since he had played in dim light, no one was sure. Elijah still kept to himself, but he felt a tiny spark of confidence flicker inside him. Then, one day, Damon approached Elijah in the hallway. Instead of the usual mocking smirk, Damon wore a friendly smile. "Hey, Elijah," he said in a soft tone. "That was you at the talent show, wasn't it?" Elijah froze. Part of him wanted to run away. But Damon looked calm, not threatening. Yeah, he admitted quietly, hugging his notebook close. Damon nodded. "I knew it," he said. "You're really good, you know. Look, I want to say sorry for before. I was a jerk. Can we start over?" Elijah stared, uncertain. Damon was the last person he expected to apologize. But Damon kept talking. "I actually wrote some lyrics," he said, pulling out a small folded paper. "I was wondering if you could help me make them into a real song." Elijah's eyes widened. Could Damon really have changed? It was hard to believe after everything he had done. But the longing to be accepted gnawed at Elijah. He thought maybe Damon meant it. Maybe people could change. "Okay," Elijah whispered, his voice shaking. "I can try." In the days that followed, Damon spent more time with Elijah, asking about his music. He seemed curious, even impressed by Elijah's abilities. Slowly, Elijah began to lower his guard. They met in the music room, where Elijah tried playing a few of Damon's lyrics on the piano. Damon would nod and make suggestions. It felt strange to be working with his former bully, but Elijah dared to hope that this was a new beginning. Then came the moment of betrayal. Elijah stayed up late one night, carefully writing out a full composition that combined his music with Damon's lyrics. He was proud of it. The next morning, he brought the completed sheets to school to show Damon. When they met in the hallway, Damon smiled. "Wow, you did it," he said, taking the papers. This is amazing, Elijah. Maybe we could perform it at the next event. Elijah nodded, shyly pleased. Sure, he said. We can practice after school. They parted ways, but after classes ended, Damon was nowhere to be found. Elijah searched the halls, the music room, even the courtyard. No sign of Damon. Disappointed, he decided to go home. The next day, something felt off. People were whispering about Elijah again, but this time it did not sound good. Some were even laughing. Elijah's stomach twisted. What had happened? In the cafeteria, he found out. Damon was sitting with a group of friends, waving around Elijah's sheets of music. But the notes were changed. Some lines had silly scribbles, some had insulting words scrawled on them like, "weird song," or "loser music." Damon's friends laughed hysterically. Look who decided to show up. Damon sneered when he saw Elijah. I fixed your music for you. Now it's good for a laugh. Elijah felt his heart stop. Why? Why would you do that? He whispered, his voice trembling. Damon shrugged, a cruel grin on his face. You really thought I liked your nerdy music? I just wanted to see what you were working on. This is hilarious. People are loving it online. That was when Elijah noticed some of Damon's friends holding up their phones, recording the entire scene. He realized they might have posted it on social media, mocking his music. His eyes burned with tears. You tricked me, he said, barely able to speak. Well, you fell for it, Damon replied, standing up. You think anyone really cares about your silly songs? You're just a weird kid who taps on a piano. Elijah's vision blurred. He turned and fled, not wanting them to see him cry. He ran to the music room, locked the door, and sank to the floor, sobbing into his hands. All his hard work, all his fragile hopes that Damon had changed, were crushed. For the rest of the day, he shut himself in the music room, ignoring the knocks and the calls of teachers. By the time he went home, he felt empty and broken. That night, he stared at his notebook, tears streaming down his face. I can't do this anymore, he whispered. I'm never sharing my music again. Then he slammed the notebook shut, shoving it into a drawer. The notes in his head went silent, replaced by a hollow ache. Elijah fell into a deep sadness. Days turned into weeks, and he refused to pick up his pencil or play the piano. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw Damon's mocking smile or heard the laughter from the cafeteria. It was enough to make him feel like giving up on music forever. But Sophia refused to let him disappear. One afternoon, she caught up with Elijah in the hallway. I haven't seen you in the music room lately, she said softly. Will you come by after school today? I have a surprise. Elijah shrugged, not really caring. But he had grown fond of Sophia, so he agreed to meet her. After school, he walked slowly to the music room, expecting maybe a new piece of sheet music or some encouraging words. When he arrived, he saw a tall man with silver hair standing next to Sophia, smiling kindly. Elijah, this is Mr. Daniel Hart, Sophia said. He's a famous composer, and he also has autism, just like you. Elijah's eyes widened. He had heard the name Daniel Hart before, someone whose music was played by big orchestras around the world. But why was he here? Daniel stepped forward, his voice gentle. Hello, Elijah. Sophia has told me about you and your music. I'd love to hear one of your compositions someday. Elijah looked at the floor. I'm not writing music anymore, he murmured. It's pointless. Daniel's eyes were full of understanding. I used to feel that way too, he said. When I was younger, people made fun of me for being different. They said my music was strange. It hurt me a lot, but I learned something important. Elijah glanced up. What? That being different can be a strength, Daniel said softly. Because I hear the world in a unique way, I can create sounds no one else can. People said it was weird, but eventually, they realized it was special. Sophia nodded, smiling at Elijah. Your music is special too, she reminded him. Damon's actions do not define who you are. You get to decide how you share your voice. Elijah felt a tiny spark inside him. Daniel's words rang true. Maybe his autism was not just a burden. Maybe it was what allowed him to hear music so clearly. Daniel reached out a hand. Would you show me your notebook? Elijah hesitated, remembering how Damon had treated his work. But Daniel seemed so sincere, and Sophia stood there looking hopeful. Slowly, Elijah retrieved the notebook from his bag. The pages were crumpled, some taped together, but it was all he had. Daniel flipped through the pages, his eyebrows rising as he read the notes. "This is incredible," he said. "You have a gift for melody, Elijah." Tears pricked Elijah's eyes. "You really think so?" Daniel nodded. "Absolutely. You must keep writing. Don't let a bully silence you." Sophia placed a hand on Elijah's shoulder. "There's also an international music competition happening soon. It's a place where people from all over the world submit their compositions. No names, no faces, just the music. Would you consider entering?" Elijah thought about it, his heart pounding. He remembered how it felt to perform at the talent show, the rush of sharing his music. But he was still scared. "What if no one likes it?" he asked in a trembling voice. Daniel smiled. "What if they love it? And even if they don't, you'll have shared something true to who you are. That's all that matters." Elijah looked down at his notebook, then up at Sophia and Daniel. Slowly, he nodded. "I'll try," he said, feeling a small flame of determination flicker to life inside his heart. For the first time in weeks, Elijah felt like he could breathe again. Maybe, just maybe, his music could still be something beautiful, no matter what Damon said or did. And so began his journey toward hope. Elijah spent every spare moment working on a new composition. He titled it Echoes of the Unheard, a piece that told the story of his struggles, his loneliness, the betrayal by Damon, and the spark of hope he had found with Sophia and Daniel. He kept it a secret, not even telling his mother or Mia about the competition. Late into the night, he would sit at his desk, headphones on to block out distractions, and carefully write each note. When he felt brave, he went to the music room after school to play parts of it on the piano, checking if the melodies flowed together. Sophia would watch quietly, her eyes shining with pride. Soon, the competition's deadline approached. Elijah recorded Echoes of the Unheard using the school's music equipment. With shaky hands, he uploaded the audio file to the competition website. They asked for no names, just the title of the piece and a short description. Elijah wrote, "For all the voices that were never heard." Days turned into weeks, and Elijah tried not to think about the contest. He focused on his schoolwork, sometimes practicing new tunes in his free time. A small part of him worried about Damon, who still glared at him in the halls. But Damon seemed quiet lately, perhaps because so many people were talking about Elijah's talent show performance rather than praising Damon's usual stunts. Then one afternoon, as Elijah was sitting in the courtyard, his phone buzzed with an email notification. He opened it, his heart thumping. It was from the competition. It read, "Dear composer, we are thrilled to inform you that your piece, Echoes of the Unheard, has been chosen as a finalist in the International Music Showcase. Congratulations." Elijah's hand flew to his mouth. He could hardly believe the words on the screen. He was a finalist. Tears of joy filled his eyes. He ran to find Sophia, nearly tripping over his own feet. Sophia gasped with delight when he showed her the email. "Elijah, this is amazing," she exclaimed, hugging him. "I'm so proud of you." In the coming days, the news spread around school. Somehow, people found out that Elijah had made it to the finals of a big international competition. Most were impressed. Some could not believe the quiet boy they hardly noticed was now recognized around the world. Even teachers congratulated him in the hallways. Elijah felt nervous but excited. The final performance would be streamed live online, with an orchestra playing all the finalists' compositions. The judges would announce the winner afterward. Elijah had never been so anxious in his life. But this time, it was the good kind of anxious, like he was about to step onto a stage in front of the entire world, ready to share his heart. When the day of the final performance arrived, Elijah and Sophia watched the live feed from the music room at school. His piece was third on the list. As the orchestra started playing Echoes of the Unheard, Elijah's breath caught in his throat. He recognized every note, every pause, each detail he had so carefully composed. Hearing it performed by a full orchestra was overwhelming. It was as if his soul was laid bare for everyone to see. When the last note faded, there was a hush before the audience on the screen erupted in applause. Elijah's eyes brimmed with tears. He had never felt so heard, so seen. No matter what happened next, he had shared his truth with the world. The next morning, Elijah awoke to a flurry of messages on his phone. Friends and strangers alike were congratulating him on the amazing performance. Clips of the orchestra playing echoes of the unheard spread across social media. People left comments like, "This music speaks to my heart," and "Who is the composer behind this masterpiece?" But there was another story unfolding. Along with clips of Elijah's performance, old videos of Damon bullying Elijah began to surface. Some students who had been silently recording Damon's actions decided to post the evidence online. The world saw Damon tear Elijah's notebook, stomp on his music, and laugh at his tears. Social media erupted with outrage. How could someone be so cruel? People asked. Others started boycotting Damon's accounts, leaving angry comments on his pictures. Overnight, Damon went from being a star at school to a symbol of cruelty. At school, the atmosphere changed. People who had once cheered Damon now shunned him, whispering as he walked by. Teachers gave him disapproving looks. The principal called him into the office multiple times. Damon's scholarship application for a sports program was rescinded when the coaches saw the videos. He lost big opportunities because of his behavior. Elijah, on the other hand, became a symbol of hope. News outlets began sharing his story, the quiet boy with autism who wrote a magical piece of music despite being bullied. They showed clips of him playing at the talent show and also mentioned how he was now a finalist in an international competition. One day, a reporter came to the school to interview Elijah. He felt shy and overwhelmed, but Sophia stood by his side, reminding him to speak from the heart. "Elijah," the reporter asked, "how do you feel about the bullying videos of Damon going viral?" Elijah shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sad it happened," he answered softly. "I don't like seeing people angry or hurt, but I hope it teaches us to be kinder." The reporter smiled. "That's very gracious of you. What do you want people to remember about your story?" Elijah thought for a moment. Then he said that everyone has a voice, even if it's quiet. And we should all listen to each other more. His words touched many viewers. People from all over the world sent him messages, saying his music and his courage had inspired them. Elijah felt a surge of gratitude. After so many lonely days, he was finally being heard. Meanwhile, Damon walked through the halls with his head down. Students whispered about him, and not in a good way. The consequences of his actions were clear. Karma, it seemed, had come full circle. Damon, once the most popular kid in school, now found himself alone. His friends deserted him, not wanting to be associated with the boy who bullied the rising star composer. Teachers watched him closely, making sure he did not cause any more trouble. He lost his big sports scholarship when the college coach saw the viral videos. The coach sent a formal letter explaining they did not want someone with such a record of bullying on their team. Damon's parents were furious, arguing with the school and trying to repair the damage, but it was no use. The internet had labeled him as a villain. One day, Damon saw Elijah walking in the hallway. The other students parted to let Elijah pass, smiling and congratulating him on his music. Damon felt a twist in his gut. He realized that he had been cruel to a boy who only wanted to share his art with the world. Guilt and shame weighed on him like a heavy chain. Summoning his courage, Damon approached Elijah by the lockers. Elijah stiffened, clutching his notebook protectively. They stood face to face, the hallway buzzing with quiet anticipation. I just want to talk," Damon said, his voice shaky. "About everything." Elijah did not respond. He remembered all the lies and the betrayal. His heart beat faster, but he stood still, meeting Damon's eyes. "I'm sorry," Damon managed to say, looking down at the floor. "I never thought it would go this far. I was stupid and I guess I wanted to feel powerful. But now I've lost everything and it's all my fault." Elijah listened, waiting. Part of him wanted to yell or ask why Damon chose to be so cruel. Another part felt no anger, just sadness. Damon had done horrible things, and now he was facing the consequences. "Please," Damon continued. "I don't expect you to forgive me, but I just needed to tell you that I'm really, really sorry." Elijah looked at Damon for a long moment, his face calm. Slowly, he hugged his notebook closer and turned away. He said nothing, no words of forgiveness, no words of hate. His silence was all he offered. As Elijah walked off, Damon was left standing there, tears pooling in his eyes. The boy he had once humiliated now had the power to forgive him or condemn him, and he chose neither. That silence hit Damon harder than any insult could. It told him he had lost the chance to matter to Elijah at all. The other students who watched the scene understood the meaning of Elijah's silence. It was a clear statement that Damon no longer had any hold over him. It was the final twist of karmic justice. Damon had tried to silence Elijah, but now it was Damon who stood voiceless in the hallway. Elijah's music soared to new heights in the following days, and Damon's world continued to crumble. This was the irony of karma, unfolding for everyone to see. The final announcement for the international competition came through a live stream. Sophia and Elijah sat together in front of a computer screen, their nerves dancing in their stomachs. Judges from all over the world appeared on video, praising the incredible talent showcased by all the finalists. Finally, the head judge said, "And the winner of this year's International Music Showcase is Echoes of the Unheard, composed by Elijah Bennett." Elijah's ears rang with the applause blasting through the speakers. For a moment, he was in shock. Sophia let out a squeal of excitement, hugging him tight. Elijah blinked, tears running down his cheeks. It felt unreal. He had won. News of his victory spread fast. People at school congratulated him, and teachers beamed with pride. For the first time in his life, Elijah felt not just accepted, but celebrated. He had become a symbol of hope for others with autism or anyone who felt unheard. Soon after, Elijah received an invitation to perform his winning piece at a global music event. This was a huge honor. He would be playing in front of a massive audience, both live and online. On the night of the performance, Elijah stood backstage at a grand concert hall. Bright lights lit up the stage, and thousands of people waited in the audience. Cameras pointed from every angle, ready to broadcast his music to the world. His heart pounded, but not from fear this time. It was from excitement. He walked out to the piano, the crowd cheering. As he settled onto the bench, he took a deep breath and began to play Echoes of the Unheard. Soft, gentle notes filled the hall, telling a story of pain, loneliness, betrayal, and, finally, hope. With each chord, the music grew stronger, echoing the courage Elijah had found within himself. The crowd listened intently, many wiping away tears. When the final note faded, Elijah stood and reached for the microphone. His hands shook, but he smiled bravely at the sea of faces. "I want to dedicate this performance," he said, his voice clear, "to all the unheard voices around the world. I hope my music reminds you that you are never truly alone." The audience erupted in applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, some calling his name. Elijah could hardly believe the roar of love and support directed at him, a boy who once felt invisible and afraid. As he took his bow, cameras zoomed in on his face, capturing a radiant smile. In that moment, he remembered Damon's cruelty, the tears he had shed, and the times he almost gave up. All of it led him here, to this triumphant moment on stage. Far away, Damon watched the broadcast on his phone, tears in his eyes. He realized how badly he had messed up. But the world was not paying attention to his regret. They were celebrating Elijah's success. And that was the final layer of karma. Damon's downfall highlighted Elijah's rise. Elijah left the stage to thunderous applause, his heart full of joy. In the end, his music spoke louder than any insult or lie. He had become a beacon of light for anyone who felt different or unheard. And in his shining moment, all he needed was that simple smile, proof that hope and resilience can triumph over cruelty. The story ended there, with Elijah's victorious grin warming the hearts of people everywhere. But his journey was far from over. He had more songs to write, more stories to tell, and more unheard voices to inspire. And that is how the boy with autism, who once hid in the shadows, found his place in the spotlight, proving that when you share your true voice, the world will listen. The end.